Why do so many people quit right before success? It's a strange question. Because nobody starts a dream planning to abandon it. Nobody launches a business hoping to shut it down. Nobody begins a journey hoping to turn back. And yet every year, millions of people walk away from goals that once meant everything to them. Why? Most people think failure destroys dreams. But failure is rarely the real problem. The real danger arrives later. When disappointment becomes exhaustion. When effort begins to feel meaningless. When hope becomes difficult to carry. That is usually the moment people quit. Imagine failing every single day, not for a week, not for a month. But for 84 days in a row, no progress, no reward. No sign that tomorrow will be any different. How long would you last? This question sits at the heart of one of the most famous stories ever written. A story that looks simple on the surface, yet contains a lesson that millions of people still need today. The story of an old fisherman named Santiago. Santiago lived in a small fishing village. Once he had been respected, once he had been successful. But now things were different. For 84 consecutive days he had not caught a single fish. The ocean gave him nothing. Day after day, week after week. People noticed, they always do, the villagers whispered. The fishermen laughed, some pitied him, others dismissed him. To them, Santiago looked finished. A man whose best days were already behind him. Even the boy who admired him most was forced to leave his boat. The boy still respected him, still loved him. But his parents wanted results. So he joined another fisherman, a successful fisherman, a safer choice. And perhaps most of us would have done the same. But there was one person who refused to believe Santiago was finished, Santiago himself. Every morning he woke before dawns. Every morning he prepared his boats. Every morning he sailed out again. Not because he knew success was coming, but because trying was part of who he was. Persistence sounds inspiring when people talk about it. In reality, persistence is repetitive, it is lonely. It is showing up when there is no evidence that showing up matters. And for 84 days Santiago continued, again and again and again. Then came the 85th day. A morning that looked exactly like all the others, the same ocean, the same sunrise, the same boat. Nothing about the horizon suggested history was about to change. But breakthroughs rarely announce themselves. That day Santiago sailed farther than usual, farther than comfort, farther than safety. Farther than most fishermen dared to go. Because sometimes the opportunities that change our lives exist beyond the places where everyone else turns back. Deep beneath the surface something enormous was waiting, a giant marlin, powerful, magnificent. Unlike anything Santiago had ever encountered. The fish seized the line and began pulling the small boat into the open sea. The battle lasted for hours, then days. The fish pulled, the old man endured. The ocean became a test of will, one refusing to let go. The other refusing to surrender. The rope cut into Santiago's hands, his muscles burned, his body begged him to stop. There was no audience watching, no crowd cheering. No guarantee that any of this suffering would matter. Only pain, only effort, only endurance. This is the part people rarely see in success stories, the lonely middle. The chapter between the dream and the reward. Everyone admires the victory. Very few admire the struggle that creates it. As the hours passed, Santiago grew weaker. But something inside him remained unbroken, not confidence, not certainty, something deeper, commitment. He had come too far to surrender now. And this is where Santiago's story stops being about fishing. Because every generation has its own ocean. Every person has their own version of the struggle. For some, it's building a business. For others, it's raising a family. For someone else, it's creating a channel, starting a career, writing a book, or chasing a dream that nobody around them understands. The details change, but the challenge remains the same. How long can you keep going when success refuses to appear? Most people believe success belongs to the smartest, the strongest, the most talented. History tells a different story. Again and again, extraordinary achievements come from ordinary people who simply stayed committed longer than everyone else. Not because they never doubted. Not because they never failed. But because they refused to leave the field. Santiago reminds us that endurance is often more important than brilliance. Failure is not the opposite of success, giving up is. Think about that for a moment. For 84 days Santiago failed, yet his story remained alive. Why? Because every morning he returned to the sea. As long as he continued rowing, possibility still existed. The moment he stopped rowing, every possible future would disappear. The same is true for us. Look at the modern world. A creator uploads videos for months and nobody watches. An entrepreneur spends years building a company before making a profit. An athlete trains in silence long before anyone notices their success. A student studies for years before receiving the opportunities they dreamed about. From the outside, these people appear unsuccessful. But appearances can be deceiving. The breakthrough often arrives after a period that looks exactly like failure. What we call success is usually the visible result. What we don't see are the invisible years that came before it, the late nights, the sacrifices, the self-doubt. The moments when quitting seemed reasonable. Most people admire the winners. Very few understand the journey that created the winner. And that is why persistence is so rare. Because the reward is visible, but the struggle is hidden. Most dreams do not die dramatically. They rarely collapse overnight. Instead, they fade quietly. One skipped opportunity, one postponed decision, one unfinished attempt. One excuse repeated often enough to become a habit. Until eventually the dream disappears. Not because it was impossible, but because the dreamer stopped moving toward it. That is what makes quitting so dangerous. It rarely feels like a major decision. Most people don't wake up and announce that they are abandoning their future. Instead, they simply stop trying, a little less each day. Until one day there is nothing left to chase. And by then, they convince themselves it was never meant to happen. Perhaps right now you're living through your own 84th day. Maybe you're working harder than anyone realizes. Maybe you're carrying disappointments nobody can see. Maybe you're tired of hearing people say, just keep going. And maybe tonight you're asking yourself a dangerous question. Is it finally time to quit? If that's where you are, Santiago's story matters more than ever. Because he stood in that exact place and chose one more day. Imagine how easy it would have been for him to stay home. Nobody would have blamed him. Nobody would have judged him. After 84 days of failure, quitting would have seemed perfectly reasonable. But reasonable decisions do not always create extraordinary lives. Sometimes the most important decision you ever make is refusing to stop. The greatest tragedy is not failure. The greatest tragedy is never discovering who you could have become. Imagine if Santiago had stayed home on the 85th day. Imagine if he had listened to the laughter, the whispers, the doubts, the exhaustion. There would be no giant Marlin, no legendary struggle, no story worth remembering. History would have forgotten him. And perhaps that is the hidden lesson behind every great achievement. The people we admire are not always the most gifted. They are often the people who survived long enough to reach their opportunity. The difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one is often much smaller than we think. One more attempt, one more conversation. One more application, one more video, one more day. One more journey into the unknown, and perhaps the future you've been waiting for is already closer than you realize. Perhaps your day 85 is tomorrow. Before we leave Santiago alone on the open sea, remember these words from Ernest Hemingway. The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. Perhaps that is why Santiago's story still matters today. For 84 days the world tried to break him. The laughter, the failure, the disappointment, the loneliness. Yet every morning he returned to the sea. Not because success was guaranteed, but because his spirit remained stronger than his circumstances. And maybe that is the lesson we need most. Life will test you, it will discourage you. It will break your plans and challenge your confidence. But the question is not whether life will break you. The question is what you become afterward. At last, Santiago achieved what seemed impossible. The giant marlin was his. The fish was so large that it could not fit inside the boat. For the first time in months, victory belonged to him. The old fisherman smiled. The nightmare was finally over, or so he thought. As the marlin drifted beside the boat, a thin stream of blood slipped into the ocean. Far below the surface, something moved, then another shadow, then another. Ancient hunters had caught the scent. Santiago believed he had won the battle. What he didn't know was that his greatest victory had just invited an even greater struggle. Because sometimes success creates problems that failure never could. The blood was in the water, the shadows were rising, and the sharks were coming. To be continued. Next episode, when success doesn't feel like success, subscribe to Beyond the Pages, because every great book hides a lesson that can change your life.